Halito, and welcome to Native ChocTalk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our native ancestors' stories and history alive while also sharing with you our native cultures, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And stay tuned for the end of each episode where we'll talk about some great ways to support Native causes and or Native-owned businesses. Let's get started. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Potential is everywhere in the Choctaw people. It's in our schools and students. It's in our small businesses and entrepreneurs. Potential is in our lifestyle and health. It's in our culture and heritage. Passion and commitment is in our blood. Ingenuity and economy are a tradition. And the Choctaw Foundation was founded for this potential. To cultivate minds and hearts, to stimulate ideas and passions, to extend lives and improve health through education, and to preserve and promote the power of our past. The Choctaw Foundation, meeting the potential of the Choctaw people.
Would you like to hear something so unprecedented, so unique in the American Indian community and the opera world that it could change the way we see music forever? My guest today is Chickasaw, and he brings his Chickasaw language and culture to the world of opera. And you don't even have to like opera to love what you're about to hear. This composer's pieces are so moving, so breathtaking. You'll walk away seeing the native language and opera in a whole new light. I myself spent years singing opera and have a degree in music. And in those days, if you had told me that someday someone would come along and create a Native American opera, I wouldn't have believed you. Today, I hope you'll be moved as I was when I heard the music and personal story of composer Jerod Tate. And so don't worry, listeners, you'll get to hear a sneak peek of his groundbreaking music in just a bit. But first, Jerod, welcome to the show.
Chukma, Chinchopataha Tak, Saholchifort, Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, Chickasaw, Talo Ikpisaya, Hashlaka Sayopa, Chukmashki, Yakoke. Hi everyone, my name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. I'm a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation here in Oklahoma, and I'm a professional classical composer.
Fabulous. Yakoki. I noticed you said Taloa in there, which is also a Choctaw word. I know our tribes, our nations are sisters, basically. So did that mean to sing Taloa?
Yeah, yes. I mean, we are just dialects of each other, really. So we're the same people, and but yes, yeah, you're hearing that, and Yakoki is a way that older Chickasaws would say Yakoke as well.
Oh,
So
really?
there's different pronunciations within both tribes, and there's some kind of there's crossover there. So yeah.
Absolutely. And that could be a podcast in itself, how,
I know, right?
yeah, the story of the white dog and all those things where the people split off and became two different tribes, and super exciting. But for our listeners, today is the only day we're doing this podcast on video. Jerod and I wanted to show you listeners Jerod's studio. So pretty snazzy, Jerod. I love it.
Thank you. I'm keeping it intact because my son and I are moving actually in just 2 days, and so I'm
Oh,
saving this to pack for last. So it
oh
won't
my
be any
goodness.
troubles.
Moving is such a pain, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going pretty well. I mean, I'm old
Good.
enough now to where I just don't get too stressed out about it. You just gotta keep packing, basically.
So
Just
true.
keep packing.
Just keep packing, just keep
That's
packing.
right.
Well, and honestly, if you're like me, every time I move, because I move every, I don't know, 3 years or so, I'm always like, I'm never doing this again, ever, ever, ever. Don't ever ask me. And then lo and
Yeah, famous
behold, my
last
husband's
words.
like, so, you know how you said you'd never move again? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
well, that's great. So what kind of equipment do you have in here? You obviously have two pianos because one's not enough.
Right,
Um,
right. Well, one is my electronic keyboard, and this is the one that's attached to my computer, and that's how I do my scores. And this is my Baldwin Baby Grand, and
oh,
actually this was
fabulous.
purchased by my mother when I was 10. So this was a
Oh,
lifetime Christmas present, basically, and birthday present. And
you
yeah,
never get
I told
anything for
her,
Christmas
I told
after
her, I said,
that.
you don't have to buy me another present ever if we get that. And so that was a gift for my mother, and so that's my piano right there.
Wonderful. Not many 10-year-olds are saying, "Hey, can I have a baby grand?"
That's very true, and there's a story behind that. So, but I did start piano when I was 8, and then when I started, I was in. I was totally in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so it looks like you do some recording on the other one, right? You use
hmm
for electronic purposes and
Yeah.
such.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
great.
And then
Well,
that's the
thanks for
composition table back there, and there's Grogu is back there as well. We got Baby Yoda back there. And
oh
that's one of my prize
awesome.
paint. It's one of my prize paintings by Brent Greenwood. He's Chickasaw and Ponca, and
That's
then I
great.
think you might be able to see Josh Henson right there, and then this is Dustin
Wow.
Mader's work right here, and that right there's my son's work. And so
Oh,
yeah,
looks fabulous. Tell him he did a great job.
thank you.
I love it. Well, I've got my ancestors behind me.
Yes, I noticed. That's
This,
terrific.
yeah, great grandparents right there.
Mhm.
This one actually went to prison for killing a bunch of people. So that's his prison photo right after his head was shaved. So, but
Okay.
somebody's got to love him, right?
Right.
Anyway,
That's true. We all
okay.
need love.
That's right. Everybody needs love. So I'm probably the only person in the world that would put his picture up. But so I was so excited for today's conversation. I could barely stand it. To be able to talk about the two things I'm most passionate about is truly an honor. So we've got opera and we've got our native language. In a moment, we'll talk about your newest composition, Shell Shaker, a Chickasaw opera. But let's first learn more about you and your world. Why don't you share more about your full name for our listeners and what it means?
Sure, absolutely. Well, my full name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. Impichchaachaaha is one of our house names, and both Choctaws and Chickasaws have house and clan names. And fortunately, both of mine have survived. I'm Shawi clan, which is raccoon, and so Impicha, the art, they were like surnames basically. So it was like from the house of Impichchaachaaha, or like von Beethoven, that kind of thing. So back in the day, we would have been referred to by either our English surnames or of the house name, so of Impichchaachaaha, so that you'd be introduced to either way. And both Choctaws and Chickasaws were like that. So that's an inherited house name that I retain that I'm very, very proud of course.
Mm.
And so just a little bit about me. First, my father, Charles, is Chickasaw from Ardmore, Oklahoma. And dad went to University of Oklahoma Law School. And dad was professionally a lawyer, a tribal judge, special district judge. And dad, really importantly, was author to our current Chickasaw Constitution. And for those that
Wow.
maybe remember, we ratified all of our constitutions back in the 70s, and so Dad was a part of that and authored the new constitution that we have now. So I grew up with a very, very deep knowledge of tribal politics and history, and especially being in Oklahoma with our 39 federally recognized tribes here, I was around a lot of different
Yeah.
tribal members and cultures, and so I'm very grateful for that, of course. And but also, Dad is a classically trained pianist and baritone.
Oh
So
my
I grew up
gosh.
with my Chickasaw father playing class and singing classical repertoire in the house, and there it is. I started piano with Dad, and when I started lessons, 3 months in, I had announced to my parents that I was to be a concert pianist. That was totally set.
Da, 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 da. I know what I want to be,
That's
mom
right.
and dad.
And I was serious. I was like, I'm going to be a concert pianist. And they were like, yeah, sure. And I'm like, no, I'm serious. And so, but mom, my mother Patricia was Manx Irish, and mom was
Hmm.
from Nebraska, and my parents met in Oklahoma. And mom was a professional choreographer and dancer. So, and my parents met in the theater. And so between my two parents, I grew up completely saturated in theater. I called myself a theater brat because I was in rehearsals all of the time. That's where I lived, was in rehearsals. And so one thing I'm really, really grateful for about with mom is that I was in the dance world, and so a lot of my American artistic heroes are choreographers like Martha Graham, Isadora Duncan, Ruth St. Denis, Ted Shawn, Agnes DeMille, and then of course you start getting into people like Jerome Robbins and Alvin Ailey and Bob Fosse, and I mean those modern choreographers that worked with Bernstein and stuff. So
Right.
this
Oh
was
my
a really
God.
major part of my wheelhouse was modern American dance. I mean, these were pioneers. And then also, mom was setting, major ballets, and so I was growing up with the finest orchestrations known to man, with like the Rite of Spring or Romeo and Juliet. This was normal for me when I was a kid. In fact, yeah, like I ran lights for mom, I did sound, I built sets, I did costume, makeup, all that kind of stuff. I was just always in all of that. And I mean, I would make edits for mom on reel to reels when she needed. So I was literally splicing Rite of Spring to mom's specifications,
Are you kidding me?
which is really horrible if you think about it. But I mean, that's just choreographers do that all the time. They're constantly adding and subtracting to the
Yeah.
depending on their choreographic needs. That didn't bother me, and I'm actually really amenable to that now. When people need to edit my music or shorten or something, that's perfectly fine. I think that's great. What I'm hoping is that, no matter where in my piece, it's good enough that it's going to be okay. But also, I do understand these things. But when you're working collaboratively with a production team, you get used to doing those kinds of things, making adjustments depending on the cast or whatever the circumstance is,
Right.
lengthening, shortening, all that kind of stuff. So that was really cool. But Dad and I, my father's still alive, and he still sings actually for his church, and so he cantors on a regular basis. And Dad goes to the Met broadcasts that are in the Goddard Center in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and he watches the Met, very faithfully on those simulcasts that they do. And Dad
Nice.
and I just have a very free flowing conversation between opera and Indian politics. I mean, it's just, I love it. I'm really, really fortunate that I have him in my life. And so that's my reality. And I didn't know growing up that that would mix the way it does now as a
Right.
composer.
Right.
And so to get into, so I went to Northwestern in Chicago as a piano major, and I was just going for piano. But mom was working on some new projects, and one was that she wanted to do a ballet based on American Indian stories from the Northern Plains and Rockies. She taught at the University of Wyoming for 30 years. And so
Okay.
she just went to me and said, "Well, you're my Chickasaw kid, and you should write my score." And I turned her down because it just blew me away. I'd never considered composing a work like that. But she's kind of like, come on, you grew up with this. What do what's the problem? But the thing is, I mean, mom opened up a door that was clearly an opportunity and something that I took very seriously. I
Mm.
mean, like within milliseconds, it processed in my head what she was asking. And beautifully and innocently, mom was asking me to be my entire self, to be both a
Well
classically trained
said.
musician and an American Indian at the exact same time, married in composition.
Which is so not something we see out there in the
Right.
mainstream.
Right. Well, the good news is look at who my examples were. I had Claude Debussy, who is a French composer. There's Tchaikovsky, who is a Russian composer. There's Bartok, who's a Hungarian composer.
Hmm.
All of these folks were completely infusing their national and ethnic identities into their compositions. But that's what
Right.
art has been doing forever. I mean, it's just that's what we do. It's like
True.
all modern artists are infusing their identities into what they do. That's what art is all about. And it's like if you take that look at all of our old shell carvings, well, those were modern artists from our own tribes bringing their national and ethnic identity into their artwork. So it wasn't something unusual, but in Indian country that was rather new. The only composer that I was aware of at the time was Lewis Ballard from Oklahoma, who's Quapaw Cherokee, and he was a symphonic composer. He was the
Right.
only one that I was aware of. And so anyway, I felt very overwhelmed, mostly because of it was a solution in my life that hadn't occurred to me. So that was overwhelming. But also, I mean, I have the weight of Tchaikovsky on my shoulders. I want to make sure that if I did it, that I did it with the same integrity as these
Right.
great artists and Martha Graham. I said Martha Graham and Tchaikovsky, and these two beings were in my wheelhouse of art. But not only that, but we're just coming off of the first 100 years of American Indian visual art as a genre, along with
Right.
literature and choreography and plays and now film. I mean, the weight to me was very, very serious, and I took it very seriously. So I eventually accepted. I couldn't get it out of my mind. It just completely saturated my being,
Yeah.
and so mom and I did that ballet. And so when I went, I had just started my piano work at the Cleveland Institute of Music. I went there and I visited with a composition teacher, and I said, I'd like to go ahead and add composition because I want to do this right. He accepted me
Hmm.
as a student, and so then I turned to my parents and I said, I am now to be a Chickasaw classical composer.
Yes.
That
This
was
is
it.
me now.
I
I
know,
go
right?
by the name.
Yes. Well, I'm just
Impichchaachaaha.
I'm that kind of a person. I overthink things, and when I make a decision, it's like, it's done.
Yeah. Same, same. I think my mom was always like, "Oh, we're going this direction. No, we're pick something." And I'm like, "I am picking something. This is the way we're going right now." Speaking of I was joking about picking a new name, but
Mhm.
Impichchaachaaha, Impichchaachaaha, right?
Yes. Mhm.
So that's your name. For my Native ChocTalk listeners, if you will send me a video saying that name correctly, the first person who sends me a video saying that correctly, I will send you a t-shirt. So I mean it for real. Let me
It's worth the
know.
t-shirt.
I'll send it to you, Jerod, too, so you can hear all the
That sounds
funny
good.
components of it.
I got to tell you,
Impa
it's really funny because people have a harder time with my first name, Jerod, than they do Impichchaachaaha.
because it's Jerod.
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Oh, I have the same problem. I'm Rachael, and it throws people off so bad. I get Raquel, Rochelle, but you're Jerod.
Yes, that's right. Yep. In high school in band, I played the trumpet for 10 years, and in band, people would call me Jerod.
Jerod.
That's kind of my
I
band
mean,
name.
you keep bringing up all these things you've done. I mean, how did you have enough time in the day? Oh, yeah, I also play trumpet. I also play the banjo and the harmonica. What do you not play? Oh my
No,
God.
oh no, actually, I'm kind of limited if you really think about it. I play the piano and I played trumpet. But I was a major trumpet jock. Like I was a total band dude, and I was like, wait, I was like first chair all the time. I was that guy, and so I
Yeah.
really, I was a total brass player. But I'm gonna brag on my son now because my son Hiloha is actually far more talented than I am. He is an incredible visual artist. He's 8 and he's been studying the horn for 2 years, French horn, and he's in his third year of ballet, and he's an
Oh my
amazing, beautiful singer. I mean, this guy is like ridiculous, and so I'm just like, all right, all I got is I can write some music, and you guys
God. That's all you've got. I
are.
mean, apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I mean, my goodness, so much talent in the
Yeah,
family.
I'm
That's
I'm
great.
really grateful. And the thing I'll tell you, this has been my experience as becoming a parent, and that is, when you become a parent, um, there's somebody in my life who's more important than I am. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful shift in perspective. And I want him to do better than I have.
Right.
I want
Right.
him to be more successful and to have more and more and more. I just have that desire. And I love it. I love that feeling. So when he
Hmm.
does stuff, I'm like, yeah, just go. Yeah,
Just do
absolutely.
it. Just do it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that there are musicians out there that come from families who don't they're not musical families, for instance. And it's kind of hard to understand your kids when they're musical. Like my dad, he played the trumpet, and he also was an art teacher for Riverside Indian boarding school. And so he was very artistic, but my mom was not. And but she appreciates art. But sometimes I think she was just like, what in the world is wrong with you? You want to be an opera singer? How are you going to make money?
Well,
And
you
she's
know,
always supportive, but yeah, so he's
it's really
lucky.
funny because actually, music and art, it can be very, very lucrative. You just have to be coached in the right ways. And that I talk to a
Sure.
lot of folks, a lot of college students about, all right, you're about to graduate, how are you going to pay the bills? And we get
Yeah.
into it. And it's
Good.
actually quite lucrative to be a classical music teacher. I mean, you're out the gate, you're worth $50 an hour from college. That's really an important basic fact for people to know about themselves is their
Right.
monetary value. And so it's actually, you can actually be quite successful. And then also there's so much flexibility when you're freelancing because you can teach part-time and make a killing on everything. And then you can do all the other projects you want to. So freelance musicians have a lot of latitude, especially in the country. We've got a lot of freedom to do that.
That's great. And it's a good push for all of us to remember to don't discourage your kids from being in the arts,
Mhm.
but they also need to know what they're getting into and how to, put food on the table too, if they're
Yes.
going to go that
Yes.
route. So that's super important. Now you
You're
talked to,
mentioning I'm sorry, you're mentioning your dad. This is something I think is really, really cool because he was a band teacher. As you said, was he a band teacher at the boarding school
uh,
or?
he was an art teacher.
Oh, an art teacher.
Yeah.
Well, there's a huge history of American Indian musicians through boarding schools and also public
Hmm.
schools. Like in Oklahoma, we're integrated, so we go to
Right.
public school. But there is a huge culture of Indian band that is just, I mean, it's massive and it goes 100 years because every boarding school had bands. So there are so
Wow.
many historic photographs of all Indian bands that holding clarinets and flutes and percussion and trumpets and everything like that. So there's a lot of classical natives from this country from 100 years ago. And in fact, I was talking about Lewis Ballard. Well, Lewis back in 1975 was hired to compose a new work that was to be played during the halftime of the playoffs, and it happened to be the Dallas Cowboys and the Washington Redskins. It just lined up that
Hmm.
he was already commissioned to do this, but he created created an all-native band of 140 kids from across the country that came from
Wow.
boarding school bands. They auditioned. He wrote this entire show. The Navajo Color Guard came out and did this whole thing, and they did this halftime show with Lewis Ballard had composed this piece for that halftime game.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Oh
and
my
he had
gosh.
to look.
Right.
He auditioned the kids. There were that many kids. They auditioned to get into that
Wow.
band.
Well, and it's like when you and I first talked the other day, I was like, where did you find these Native American opera singers? And you were like, well, you're one. So
Well,
not that I
okay,
sing
so
anymore, but
that's something
they're
that's
out
really,
there.
really, it's really beautiful about our current experience with how heavily we're networking digitally right now.
Yes.
And since the
Yes.
advent of the internet, we've been able to do this anyway. So, like for instance, when I did my last residency at Hopi High School, I walk in to the media room and they're all online looking at the news from Great Britain. I mean, that's where
Right.
their minds were from the Hopi reservation. They're just tied right in. Well,
Oh,
that's a symbol of the times. It means that we are extremely connected these days, and so the momentum is increasing. But our native classical musicians we're networking at a much more rapid pace now.
true.
And so I happen to know a good handful of American Indian opera singers. I'm just thrilled. And of course, I didn't know you until you reached out. And then there we go. Here's another one. And so,
Right.
and I mean, this is just scratch. And of course, we do have, we are all over the country. So it's hard to just be down the street or like at the exact same school.
True.
But we
True.
have this right now, and it's really serving us very, very well. So I'm really psyched about that.
That's awesome. I wish I could promote some kind of forum where people who are, have different talents, whatever it is, can just put their name on in one single place so we can all find each other.
Mm,
Maybe someday in what spare time I have, we'll get to that. But so
mm,
I noticed you mentioned your son and that you wanted to brag on him. And I know you won't brag on yourself. So I'll share a couple of excerpts from BroadwayWorld.com
okay.
about your expertise. So don't turn red. Mr. Tate is a 3-time commissioned recipient from the American Composers Forum, a Chamber Music America's Classical Commissioning Program recipient, a Cleveland Institute of Music Alumni Achievement Award recipient, a governor appointed creativity ambassador for the state of Oklahoma. I had no idea there was such a thing. That's so cool.
Mm,
An Emmy Award winner for his work on the Oklahoma Educational Television Authority documentary, The Science of Composing. I need to go find that. That sounds
mm,
interesting.
mm,
In addition to his work based upon his Chickasaw culture, Tate has worked with the music and language of multiple tribes such as Choctaw, Navajo, Cherokee, Ojibwe, Creek, Pechanga, Comanche, Lakota, Hopi, Tlingit, Lenape, Tongua. That's one I haven't heard of. Shawnee, Caddo, Ute, Aleut, Shoshone, Cree, Pout. I'm saying these wrong. I'm so sorry. And Kootenai.
Oh, Salish Kootenai. That's the Flatheads in Montana.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Thanks for every one of those tribes that is listening and put up with what I just did to your tribal names. I'm so sorry. Um,
Hey,
I do not mean
that's
disrespect.
it's these human elements I think are really important. I mean, we got over 500 tribes in the country, and we don't all know how
Right.
to pronounce each other's names. I mean, it's not you don't just wake up. You're not born Indian and know how to say everything. From the
True.
tribes. It takes us time to learn about each other as well. So
Thank
I
you.
love these
I
kind of
appreciate
movements.
that. That gives me a little hope. I mean, can you imagine what it was like when there were thousands of tribes? Like, I mean, just it's
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah. Mhm.
So here we go. There's some more. Believe it or not, there's more, people. Tate earned his Bachelor of Music and Piano Performance from Northwestern University, as you mentioned, where he studied with Dr. Donald Isaac, and his Master of Music and Piano Performance and Composition from the Cleveland Institute of Music, where he studied with Elizabeth Pastor and Dr. Donald Erb. He has performed as first keyboard on the Broadway national tour of Les Miserables and Miss Saigon, and been a guest pianist and accompanist for the Colorado Ballet, Hartford Ballet, and numerous ballet and dance companies. Where did you find time to do all this? Not to mention,
Trying
did
to
I
make a
say this
living.
earlier? He's the cultural ambassador. Did I say that? Oh, creativity ambassador and cultural ambassador
Yes,
currently.
I'm currently cultural ambassador for the United States Department of State.
Oh, good Lord. That's
Mhm.
amazing. Honestly, Jerod, your bio and resume are so extensive. There was a whole lot more. I couldn't possibly fit it all into this podcast. So we would have had to use the whole hour just telling about the things you've done. Not trying to make you blush, really. I'm impressed that you really have gone all in because you're passionate about it. You love what you're doing. So Listeners, a long story short, this Chickasaw man is super talented. So I want to learn more about you as we go too. So let's start at the beginning. We want to hear it all. Did you grow up in Oklahoma?
I grew up between my parents divorced when I was younger, and so I spent time between Oklahoma and the Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
And over time that became a real resource because I was around a whole bunch of Northern Plains and Rockies tribes as well. So here we got 39 tribes in Oklahoma, and then there's more tribes up north. And so I was exposed to a lot of Indian country very early on. I'm
Yeah.
very grateful for that because it's so important that we know as much as we can about each other. And it was really just kind of handed to me without me even realizing it. So I'm really grateful about that.
Totally. It sounds like your
Mhm.
parents were also just such a big influence on your life, and you've spoken so highly of both of them.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
they both were. They both had tremendous impact on me. And of course, look, when I was 15, I would not articulate it this way. I'd be like, "Mom,
sure, of
Dad,"
course.
it's
Oh
like,
my God, we're going to the ballet
yeah,
again.
totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like, so I mean, I took all that for granted like kids do. But as I get older, I'll say, I pinch myself. I feel like I'm Forrest Gump. Like, how did this happen? How did I end up
Yeah.
here? And
Yeah.
so it's just, I just really am just amazed at the resources that I was given. And I'm really glad I'm living long enough to see that and utilize it. I mean, I just want to keep utilizing this as much as I possibly can. So I'm planning on another 50 years of composing, and
Yes.
I've just got all these tools that were given to me by my parents, so I have a lot of gratitude for that.
Oh, indeed. And I
Mhm,
love that you're influencing Aloha as well, your son. And
mhm,
now you had mentioned something to me on the phone the other day about Oshi Aloha song.
mhm.
There was something that you were singing to him or something like that, and then it made its way into one of your pieces or something.
Yeah, actually made it into the opera, and so that's actually it's a big let's say where's that? That's right. It's one of the major scenes in the second act of the opera, Shell Shaker. And so no, yeah, I will sing different tribal songs to Hiloha when we go to bed, and so
Oh,
I just made up one that goes through your relatives. And so I just made one up, and I call it Oshi Hiloha because Oshi is your son, and Hiloha, so it's my son Hiloha. And then we go through mom and dad and grandma and grandpa, and so it's
so
just this
cute.
repetitive, fun song. And as I was coming, there's a scene in the opera where Loksi, the main character, her name is Loksi, which is turtle, as you know. And then there's
Mhm.
this actual grandfather turtle that she gets to know. There's a relationship that's really important. And the orchestra comes in with this beautiful scene. They're having a great time. It's like a really happy time in the story. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that's the song I'm going to use, is
Oh,
this
I love
melody.
it.
And since my son plays horn, it's like four horns, full tilt. This
Oh
this
my
is his song. And
gosh.
so I'm like, I get chills when I think about it. It's like I told him, I said, son, by the way, your song is in the opera, and it comes in with the full horn section, and you're
What did
gonna
he think?
recognize it. Oh, he's like, oh, okay, cool, thanks, Dad. It's like sure.
He
But
won't appreciate it as much as he will when he gets older.
I agree, and I mean, of course, then I'm like, this better be good. Oh my gosh, this better be good. But I know that when he's at the premiere, he's going to hear it. He'll probably sing out loud with it. He has no inhibitions, and so he'll probably end up
Awesome.
singing with it. So it's like he'll hear it.
I
And
love
I think
it.
he'll feel pretty good about
What a
it.
great tribute to your son, too. I mean, for generations to come, he'll be able to tell his grandkids, this song was written for
Mhm.
me by my dad or thinking of
Yeah.
me.
Well, and one thing that's, I mean, I'm really proud of this, this is part of my deep passion, is that this opera is saturated with Muskogean style and our Muskogean songs. When I say Muskogean, these are songs that I'm borrowing from Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Creek.
Okay.
Because I want all of our Muskogean people to go, oh, hey, I know that song.
Right.
And yeah,
Right.
and I love doing that. And when I'm working with other tribes, that's why I list those other tribes, is because I will work with their music and their language, so that when those tribal members are in attendance for those performances, they're like, oh, I understand that. Oh, I recognize that song. And I'll tell you a story about this, how this really affected me. Back in 1997, I was coming off the tour with Les Mis, and I went straight up to the Flathead Indian Reservation to sing and play for a friend's wedding. And so what I did is I found. Oh no, I'm sorry. Joan Quick to See, the visual artist, had sent me a tape of one of their old Salish love songs, and so I was like, "Oh, I don't know what I'm gonna do." So what I did is I kind of made a round dance arrangement with a hand drum, and I sang this love song to them at their wedding, and
Hey.
the community response was fantastic because many of them had not heard that song for decades.
Oh, so cool.
And I was
That's
like,
so
oh,
cool.
and I told him, I said, well, I learned it from an old recording that was made of the Nine Pipes, and that name just resonated with the community. And I didn't know who the Nine Pipes were. I just knew it was off the Smithsonian recording that
Right.
Jean had sent me. And they were just so moved. And Terry was like, Jerod, you brought people to tears. And I was like, aha, right. I mean, it really stuck with me. I'm like, okay, this
Gives
is
me
really
goosebumps.
important, because then in all the theatric productions to bring our language and our songs onto the concert stage. I mean, I was already doing it, but boy, did that give me a fuel injection to really make sure and give those moments for our tribal members to where they could go, I know that music, you know?
Yes.
And of course, I mean, I abstract, I get very modern with all kinds of things, but there's moments where those songs are just crystal clear. There they are. So that's a very driving memory for me.
Beautiful. I can't imagine being like, oh, I'm getting married today. Now, the person that's going to be singing, he's coming from Les Mis, and then he'll come. And oh, and he's performing a traditional song from
Yeah.
the tribe. It's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
Pretty
you know, and
cool.
of course, I'm Chickasaw. They had no idea that I would be singing this old Salish folk
Yeah.
song. They had no clue. And but see, that's a technology reinforcement that I really really believe in. And I mean, a lot of our
Yeah.
tribal members have been learning songs that we have found on some of the archival recordings. So we've revived a lot of our material that was archived by some people that it felt questionable at the time, and we've had
Yeah.
controversy about that. But I see a lot of positives, like, well, you know, for better or for worse, they preserve some of our songs, but we own those. Those are ours. We can have full ownership of that, and it's, so you know, we can just reclaim basically. And of
Yeah.
course, you know, with
Absolutely.
NAGPRA, the Native American Graves and Repatriation Act, you know, coming, what was 1991, I think, when that passed, that gave another surge of like, okay, let's get all things back, including archival videos and audio that we had. I mean, we can
Oh,
gain all those
yeah.
things back. So I just believe that, you know, things happen for a reason, and there's a lot of positive things that have happened for us as Native people. So that was an example, and I just felt like there was a lot of just, you know, stars aligning in that very moment that really spoke to me and said, all right, Jerod, there's more purpose for what you're doing.
Isn't it a wonderful time to be Native?
It is. I like it.
Absolutely. I mean, it just feels like even in the last year, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the major surge is right now, but I'd like to thank everyone who has put in time to try to bring awareness, because those people have paved the way for us to some degree. And you are one of those as well. You're doing this groundbreaking thing by pairing our native language with opera, and that has not been done yet. So, I think when we were talking about your son, when you and I last spoke on the phone, you were talking about these really cool things you do. And while we were talking, you were doing laundry and putting chicken in a crock pot. And it just kind of hit me funny. It's like one minute you're blazing a trail in the world of opera and Native American arts. And then the next minute you're like being a dad, putting chicken in the crock pot, just everyday life of a maestro. But it's
Well,
funny,
you know, and everybody has that. I mean, that's something that's, I think, is very universal and unifying. Well, parenthood is very unifying. It's
isn't
really
it?
cool what that does. And also just family, just any sense of family, honestly, is, I mean,
Yes.
I'm just saying that because I'm just so jazzed about being a dad right now. So I speak that language. But family is a really, really important thing that unifies all people. And you know, we're all paying bills. We're all cleaning, doing laundry. We're all trying to make sure the house is okay, that our kids are safe, that our families are taken care of as they're aging, as we have other cousins and nieces and nephews and siblings. You know, we're all very connected with each other. We all care. We all want our families to be okay. So those, you know, all those daily. I mean, that's, we all pay bills. You know, it's just, we all do
It's
those
true.
things.
It's true. I
Yeah.
remember I had won an award from the New York Met, and I was really excited. And I came home. Once I got home, I was, felt so glamorous, and I felt so loved and just, adored for a moment. The ego was feeling good. And then I went to the pantry, and I was a starving college student at the time. So I went to the pantry, and all I had was some commodity cheese from my Indian commodity cheese. I was like, I'm so hungry. So I ate so much cheese that night. But I was like, one minute, this audience is applauding for you, and then the next minute you're like eating commodity cheese. So
Mhm. That's true.
but it really just goes to show you we're all just people. I mean, Brad Pitt at one time was probably just, a server at a restaurant trying to make ends meet while he was trying to become an actor. So
That's absolute fact. Absolutely. I mean, and the thing is even some people that we perceive as, having silver spoons from birth, they go through their own tragedies. There's all kinds of things that happen.
truly
And then also it's like, you think about like what you're saying, like these normal lives. It's like, we drive on streets that are paved by people who go home to feed their families, and they risk their
true.
lives so that we can drive our cars, and they're
Yeah,
oftentimes underpaid themselves, and it's like, so they're heroes by allowing us to travel, and they go home and they're trying to make ends meet as well. So it's,
love
there's a
that.
lot of universality with that. And then also it's like people who change the world all come out from under rocks. It's like you never know when somebody's going to come out with this unbelievable invention that changes all mankind. It's really incredible.
Very
So
true. Very
so,
true.
I like to remind myself of that, because we are all very, very much closer to each other than we may realize sometimes, and I think it's really important to just kind of feel that as much as we can.
Very true. And be grateful for those who help you and pave the way, no pun intended, but
Yeah,
yeah,
agreed.
very, very grateful.
Mhm.
So I'm from Anadarko, as you know, and you told me a really great story about a famous athlete the other day that had to do with Anadarko. Share with, because I have a lot of people that listen that are from Anadarko. So
Sure.
you got to share the story.
Well, I'll give a little bit of background. One part that we can talk about here in a bit is I also teach and mentor American Indian youth in composition, and it's something that it's just unbelievable. I just it's great to do this, and so we'll talk about
Yeah.
this. But so I was on one of my gigs, and I was at the Grand Canyon Music Festival teaching on the Navajo and Hopi reservations. And so I was down in Palaka, and I was meeting the kids at the high school there at Hopi High, the Hopi Bruins, and
Woo.
for the first time. And so I was just kind of getting the interviews together. They're bringing their guitars, and one was a clarinetist, and so we're sitting down, this all Indian band, and
Yeah.
so I'm going through, and I was just asking, like, hey, do you have any ideas? Do you have just what are your impulses? What are you feeling you want to do? And they were writing music for string quartet, so just kind of getting them coached up about what do you want to do, and so this one kid comes in, and he didn't look Hopi to me, and I was trying to place him. I was like, well, he might be a mixed blood or something like that. So we're just sitting there, very modest kid, and so we're talking, and I was like, "You're not from around here, are you?" And he goes, "No." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Oklahoma." And I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well, what tribe are you?" He said, "I'm Sac and Fox." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Well, I said, "What are you doing out here in Hopi country?" He said, "Well, both my parents work for BIA, and so they were relocated out here. So I'm going to high school here at Hopi High." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." I said, and his name is Norman. And so I was like, "Well, Norman, what's your last name?" And he said, "Thorpe." And I said,
You're
"As
like,
in
okay.
Jim?"
Right. As
He
in,
said,
who are
"Yeah."
you related to?
Yeah. He said, "Yeah, Jim's my uncle." I was like,
Oh
"Oh
my
my God."
God.
One of my composition students is Jim Thorpe's
Dang.
nephew.
Just so
I'm
happens. I mean, it's such a small community that can happen in our community.
Yes, yes. And of course, I
I
was in the
love
middle
this
of
story.
Arizona. I was like, "What is going on here?" See what I'm saying? I'm Forrest Gump. I'm just Forrest Gump. How did this happen? Well, my parents, my dad and his siblings, when they were in high school, met Jim in one of his. He'd come to Anadarko, and a lot of Indian kids went out to Anadarko to meet him. And
Wow.
so I get out of this lesson, and I'm going back to Tuba City. It's a bit of a drive back there through the mesas, and so I stop at a payphone. I call my aunt Ann. I was like, "You won't believe who I just met." And she's like, "Jerod, I shook Thorpe's hand when I was a kid." So she shared me this story about what he was like. And I said, "I swear he looks just like him." And so we were describing his
Oh, wow.
voice. And Anne was
Wow.
recalling Jim Thorpe's voice, and Norman just sounded just like his uncle. It
Oh
was
my
really
gosh.
incredible. But I mean, I was just like, I can't believe this. I'm having
So
this phone
cool.
conversation in the middle of the Hopi reservation, calling my Chickasaw aunt in Houston, talking about Jim Thorpe and Anadarko, because I just taught his nephew at Hopi High. I mean, this is just crazy.
Some kind of sign. I don't know what, but maybe you need to make like a Jim Thorpe opera. I'm running.
Yeah, I know, right? Just have him running all over the stage and singing, running and singing.
Also, it's really hard to run and sing.
Yes, it is.
That's why all the heroines like die at the end, because at least they can lay there and sing.
And they can rest. But hey, you know what? They can just lip sync. I mean, everybody does it, so they just lip sync and run.
Sure. Little Milli Vanilli going on there. I love that story though. So for
Yeah.
our listeners, I assume most of y'all know who Jim Thorpe is, but just in case, he was a sack and fox Olympic gold medalist who won the pentathlon and decathlon and also happened to play pro baseball and football. I mean, he was just like this, he's like the Michael Jordan of the day, except he was Native American, which is cool. So I'm just blown away by these
And he
stories.
was also voted by he was voted athlete of the century by
Wow.
Sports Illustrated. He and Michael
Damn.
Jordan were neck and neck for that. But Jim Thorpe, and because anybody who knows their sports history are major fans of Jim Thorpe because of his versatility, how many things he just crushed, knocked out of the
Wow.
ballpark, so to speak. And yeah, he won, he won gold medals in the Olympics. And so like, yeah,
What a
this guy was
guy.
amazing. He's a real athletic hero. He really is. So yeah.
Truly, truly. And you know what's crazy about your meeting his nephew is that it just proves that we're not that far away generations wise from some of these greats like the code talkers, Jim Thorpe, certain notable chiefs and such. That hits home for me too. So what a funny
Mhm.
story.
Agreed.
So let's hear more about your career. What got you into composing? We've talked a little bit about that. So at what age did you, or what year did you start composing?
I was 23, and that's of course was when Mom had commissioned me for a new ballet. And I see,
Mm,
look how fortunate I was. I was commissioned for my very first work.
wow.
And
Amazing.
I'll tell you a story around that that was actually really, really important. And that is, okay, so for the ballet, Mom wanted to focus on story, like a plethora of stories from the area.
Yeah.
And then we had a storyteller that wove in poetic storytelling in between. And so we were looking, this was in 1991, and Dances with Wolves had just come out. And
Ah,
so we were looking for, actors that we thought would be a nice draw. And so we just went through the screen credits of all the people that were in
are
Dances
you
with Wolves.
serious?
Yeah. We called Floyd Westerman, called Graham Greene. They weren't available, but we got a hold of Rodney Grant, and Rodney played the character Wind in his hair. He had hair literally down to his ankles. He
Yeah.
was the adversary. He was Kevin Costner's adversarial guy. They
Yeah.
didn't like each other at the beginning, and then they became best friends. He's in that famous scene where he yells from the top of a mountain on his horse, "You will always be my friend." It's like this big,
Yes.
crying moment.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we called Rodney. He was in France doing a gig, and we faxed him the whole script and everything like that. And he agreed to do it. So Rodney came in like lightning into this gig. He was very famous at the time, and so he agreed to do this. And Rodney was also
Cool.
doing immediately a lot of social work with kids, like visiting kids on reservations, giving them
Oh,
inspirational
wow.
talks, all this kind of
Cool.
stuff. He was really using his stature to motivate Native
I
kids.
like him.
So yeah, we had one of our visits was to the Wind River Reservation, also to Pine Ridge when we were out in South Dakota, and so anyway, so he that man was just on me, and he was like, "Man, you got to do this. You got to be a native film scorer and all this kind of stuff. You got," and I was just like, I was trying to figure out where I was going with all this, and I told
Yeah.
him, I said, "I don't think I can do this," and oh my gosh, that was the wrong language, but Rodney was really really on me about this, and I mean, it was intense. He was so passionate about me becoming a classical symphonic composer, and that was one of the biggest reasons why I did. And he lives in California now, and we're
Thank
still
you,
friends.
Rodney. I
Yes, I know.
love that
Thank
he
you, Rodney
inspired
Grant.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he was. I mean, and so he was just on me about it. Now, I also within the in the classical community, people were also like, "You've got something that's new, fresh. This is really, really great." Everybody saw a lot
Yeah.
of value in this, but Rodney Grant just hammered it into me, and he is probably the reason why I decided to go ahead. I mean, he did it. It's like,
Wow.
that's my deep memories. Like this guy was like so passionate about it. I was like, he's got to be right. He's got, so I trusted him. I'm glad I did.
Oh, isn't
Mhm.
it crazy when you look at people in your life who inspired you in certain ways? And
Mhm.
you've had a lot of inspirations in your life and you haven't taken it lightly. You have really gone forward and said, I'm going to take this seriously and I'm going to try this out.
Yeah.
So, okay. Now, speaking of, I'm excited to talk about Shell Shaker, a
Yes.
Chickasaw opera. And this is your newest work. And again, that combining of opera with Native American language is something that's never been done, as I mentioned earlier. Why don't you explain to us what the title means? What is a shell shaker in the Chickasaw culture?
Absolutely. So, to my knowledge, this is the first opera that's entirely in one of our languages. And so, this is entirely sung in the Chickasaw language. And shell shaker comes from our shell shaking that you and I share within our tribes, and it is a mark of our culture for Southeast Muskogean culture. Also, woodlands in general. There's shell shaking all over the woodlands of the United
Hmm.
States, so it resonates with an enormous amount of Indian country. And so we don't have a powwow drum for our sound. Ours is turtle rattles. And so, the lead singer in our stomp dances has one, rattle in their hand, but it's the gals who do the massive percussive shell shaking, and of course they've got bundles of turtle rattles on each leg, and they
Hmm.
shuffle, and that's why they call it stomp dancing because they're stomping on the ground, and it creates the 16th note type of a rhythm. And of course, when you've got all these concentric circles of people going around the fire, I mean, you can have 100 shell shakers at the same time. And as you know, that's an amazingly beautiful wash of shell shaking sound. It's incredibly powerful. So you've got the lead singer singing, and then you've got the response from the whole crowd and all of the shell shaking. To me, it's one of the most powerful cultural things that we've ever had in Indian country.
I'm
And I
dying to
love
see it.
yeah, I love people seeing this and experiencing it. So the legend of how we received our turtle shell shakers as part of our culture is one of our Rosetta Stone legends. Another one is spider brings fire, like how we all received fire. That's
Yes.
shared amongst our tribes as well. And so, fire is the first technology of all humankind. And so many of us, there's fire stories all over the world. There's also trickster stories all over the world. That's a very important one because tricksters are a very important part of our psychology and our lives. And so then for us, our shell shaking. So this is one of the stories of how this came about. And so the story in brief is about a young Chickasaw girl named Loksi, and she's named because of the wisdom of the turtle. Loksi means turtle, and but the kids tease her that she's got a name of a slow animal. So there's these mixed feelings. So immediately you've got
Right.
somebody who's in an identity crisis at the
Right.
beginning. So she's dealing with kids who are making fun of her. She's actually a very, very wise person, but they don't see it. And so she, looks for solace with her mom and her grandmother, and they're like, "Hey, just you're fine. We love you. You're great. You were named after the wise turtle." But she doesn't like this because she's a kid. No kid likes
Right.
their name. I don't know one kid who's ever really
Right.
loved their name. So, and kids always mess with each other's names. That's just like totally normal for that age. So anyway, that's the beginning. Is her with that crisis in her life, and her grandmother has advised young people in the past, you go to the river to seek advice and tell your story, and the river will give you an answer. So her grandmother says, you should go to the river and talk to the river. And she doesn't want to, and her dad says, you should go. And so she's getting this encouragement. So she goes to the river, and she goes into the river, and she lets her hair down and cries. And the river stops and listens to her story. And she's devastated. She wants to be part of the kids, and she feels like she's on the outside and doesn't feel like she belongs. And the river says, you are to leave right now and go into the forest for 4 years. And of course, that's devastating. And so that's, and just so you know, that this is the end of the first act is when this is all happening. So they have a massive duet that's like, she's in turmoil. What? This is a big surprise. I didn't know. She's
Wow.
devastated. And the river's like, you gotta go. He's sending her off like it's like sending her off on a boat into the middle of the Pacific Ocean or something.
Oh
And
my
so that's
gosh.
that's the first act, and that's how that closes, is this big dramatic scene. So then the second act is she goes into the forest. Of course, she's lost, and she trips over this very old turtle. Well, she sees the turtle, he's old and slow, and she begins to make fun of him. Well, the turtle says, you're making fun of me, and she realizes, oh my goodness, I'm doing exactly what happened to me. And so immediately
Oh,
you
wow.
see this
Yeah.
transformation, this growth is happening. So she and the turtle become best friends, and the turtle then introduces her to all of the animals of the forest, and they teach her all of the ways to live in the forest, all the different, so they teach her culture basically.
Right.
So the turtle's holding out, she doesn't know what he's going to teach her. So finally, and he's an old turtle, well, they build a place, and she's living in the forest, and she loses track of time. Of course, she's having a great time with
Right.
all of her new animal friends. And so one evening, she and the turtle go to sleep, and she has a dream that the grandmother turtle is coming to take him away to be with his ancestors. And she wakes up and realizes it wasn't a dream; it was real.
Oh,
He went
yeah.
home, but the grandmother says he has left you a gift. This is your final gift, and it's the shells. And so she knows what to do with those,
No.
and she realizes 4 years has gone by, and she knows it's time to go home. So, in the meantime, the grandmother has also visited the village and given them a premonition that she is to return someday with something very, very important. Well, I've added a love interest. There's a little boy named Hiloha, which is my son's name.
No way.
Hiloha is our word for thunder, which is both Choctaw and Chickasaw. And so he's secret, but while she's away, he actually becomes one of the leaders of singing. He becomes a Minko, basically. And so, and he knows she's going to return. And so he's very patient about this. Well, at the very end of the second act, she goes home. There's a big aria in her return, and she comes into the community, and they're about to begin dancing, but without the shells. And she gives the shells to the women, and there's a big stomp dance at the very end of the opera. And that's
Oh,
when they
so
so
cool.
it's a big finale of them shell shaking, and then that's the end of the opera. So it's a happy ending.
Yes, it's a happy ending. And I love the story, like that's so our Native American stories. And
Yes, it really
it
is.
has a
And
great
one
message
thing I
too.
really like about it is that it's also very it's an archetype of a lot of stories around the world.
Hmm.
Personal identity crisis with somebody. They go
Yeah.
off to an unknown place. Usually it's the forest. And of course, here she goes out into the forest. Everybody goes to the forest. Luke
Everybody goes
Skywalker had to
yeah.
go to the forest.
The
So,
swamp.
right. But when and they meet their challenges and they grow and then they come back. More. That they've had enlightenment and
Yes.
they're more. They've
Yes.
grown up. And
Right.
so she comes back and of course and transforms and gives she becomes basically a knowledge bearer for her tribe, and she bestows all the new knowledge onto the tribe, including the shell shaking.
And I love this the role of the older turtle because, obviously in our culture it's very important to honor our elders. And he's like the Yoda of the Shell Shaker opera.
He
So
is. That's right. I love it. And when this actually was a smaller scene in my recent CD called Loak Shopala, which is many scenes of Chickasaw culture, and one of them is called Shell Shaker, and it was a smaller version of this. And when I wrote it, and I realized, I'm like, you know what? I think this could actually, and I was thinking,
yeah.
could this be a full opera? And so what happens is I've developed the story, and actually we're in the middle of I've written about 60% of it now, but we're still
Yeah.
developing the libretto, and so we're actually have postponed the premiere. It's going to be next November. It was going to be in March, but we all
No,
want to.
I was hoping for spring.
No, I'm so sorry. But actually,
Okay,
it's
fine.
really everybody agrees. All the singers and all the production team, we all agree this needs more time. And honestly, it's because everybody wants to make sure that this comes out the gate on our best foot possible.
Absolutely. Do it right
Yeah.
or don't do it
So
at all.
and
Yeah.
if you don't mind, I'll transition. This is something I'm really excited about because we have our American Indian singers already cast in this. And so
Yes.
three singers that we have cast so far. One is Choctaw. His name is Mark Billy.
Woohoo.
And Mark is from Oklahoma and he now lives in Minneapolis and he sings professionally with an opera company called An Opera Company. They're a brand
Hmm.
new opera company. And so Mark he's a baritone and he is, oh my gosh, his voice. Oh my
Wow.
gosh. It's so beautiful. He is so beautiful. And so we have a Spinto soprano who is
Okay.
Muskogee Creek, and she's Kirsten Kunkel, and she lives in Ohio. And so she's been cast, and we have a young Cherokee soprano, Kate Morton. She's a lyric mezzo. Well, she's a lyric soprano slash mezzo. She's got a
Wow.
really
Okay.
unusual voice, and
Yeah.
so she's been cast. So we already have three people who have been cast, which I'm very excited about. So we've got our Indian singers in the cast so far, and so we're still working on casting right now. But those people are absolutely in right now, and I'm
For
very
sure.
excited about that. So yes, so this
So
opera is
awesome.
going, and the costume design is by our Chickasaw, I'd like our Dame Chickasaw textile expert, Margaret Wheeler, and so she's made all the renderings that are actually on my Facebook page now on
They're
Instagram.
beautiful. I'll be sure to share them with our Facebook and
Please
my
do.
Native
Margaret is
ChocTalk.
amazing. Margaret is she has a company called Mahota Textiles, and her work is just unbelievable.
Mm.
So at the premiere, they will well actually the premiere is going to be a concert style premiere, kind of like Les Mis, like the 25th anniversary of Les Mis. So and then we'll stage it later, but we're going to do it as a concert premiere with the orchestra, but everybody will be in full
Great.
costume.
Nice.
So yes, I'm very excited about this. So that's what that's going to be like, and it's really cool.
Oh,
Oh, and also I'm not fluent in the language, but our obviously our the director of our language department is Josh Henson, and Josh is a modern Chickasaw speaker. And
okay.
when I say that, it's that he's very comfortable with interpreting and translating into modern text. And Josh and I have worked on several projects. In fact, one of them was called Misha Sapokni about the brothers Choctaw and Chickasaw going to cross the
Oh,
Mississippi together and splitting. That was I
so
wrote an
cool.
oratorio about our migration story, and that is all in Chickasaw as
Of
well.
course you did.
Of course. And so, but Josh is our interpreter and translator. And so between Josh and Lila Palmer, she is our dramaturg slash other librettist. The three of us are creating the libretto together, which I'm really grateful for because Lila has great expertise. Josh is, and so it's a very unusual circumstance in which the libretto is being created. So, I'm
Oh,
providing
okay.
the main architecture and she's helping out with like, to make sure that the English poetry is really, really great. And then Josh is making sure the Chickasaw is airtight. So it can be performed both in English and Chickasaw equally successfully. And of course with super titles, that kind of thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's actually our biggest thing is that we want to make sure that all of that text is 100% available to do however anybody wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So
that's
anyone can
really
adopt it.
important. Because
Yeah,
I'm
I
not going
mean,
to just have it in the Chickasaw, and that's fine. But I we need to develop the English text where the English text. So I'm going to have two versions composed, like two
okay.
scores, one in English and one
Wow.
in Chickasaw.
So, as a former opera singer, I know that an aria, which is basically a song,
Mhm.
is not just made up of the voice and the notes. The words themselves are a vital component of it all, more so than someone would probably know. And like the syllables have to fall in the right place, on the right pitch in order for it to work. And anyone who knows opera knows that Italian is typically the most popular language. It just, it glides off the tongue so
Does.
perfectly,
Mhm.
especially with those lyric coloratura arias. I'm lyric coloratura, but those light, high pitched songs, you think about how well Italian goes with those. So I wondered how challenging or not challenging it was for you to take those, translated words and from English to Chickasaw and strategically place them in
Mhm.
all the right spots for your singers. I mean, what was that like?
Well, I mean, it's really hard to describe. So basically, the way that Josh and I have worked is I will create an English base. He translates it into and interprets it into Chickasaw, and then gives me like the literal translation back, and then I will adjust the English to where the English actually sounds Chickasaw-ish in its
Okay.
delivery.
Yeah.
So that's what I usually am working with, and so I mean, I know the words that are being sung, and I guess I'm just kind of following my artistic intuition about because yeah, the English does sound very different, and so I'm trying to make it sound really good in Chickasaw. But
Yeah.
that's the challenge. That's why we're addressing this is because I want to be able to create an English version. Obviously, going to be very similar. All translations do this.
Sure.
There's a little bit not the same as the first
Yeah.
one.
You lose a
Obviously,
little bit
you lose some
one
things,
way or the other.
but sometimes it actually you gain some things. It really just depends on how you look at it, or like how the translations are. So I guess what I'm saying is like I follow a lot of I just follow my muse a lot. I follow my impulse,
Yeah.
and I mean I'm singing it to myself all the time. So I'm trying it out on my voice and seeing how that feels, and
Yeah.
yeah. So I just do a lot of like in studio experimenting with my own singing, which I will never want anybody else to hear.
Are you
That would be
baritone?
horrible. No, I am a baritone, but I'm not a classically trained singer, and that's the last thing I would want to do is pollute somebody's mind with me singing through that and just destroying it for them. So they hear the final result. But no,
I guess I
I'm
won't ask you to break out in song then. Fine.
yeah, right.
Whatever.
No, my son is a better singer than I was. He could do that. But I mean, I do that. I have to because I want to make sure
Yes.
that I feel
Yes.
that the Chickasaw is feeling that it's sounding and feeling good to me.
Right.
So I mean, and I mean, I can pronounce all of it. I'm very comfortable with all the pronunciation. And so I just sing it to myself as I'm playing.
And are you fluent in
No,
Chickasaw?
I'm not fluent. I can read it and I can pronounce it.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's why I need Josh because I'm not
Sure.
an adult fluent speaker.
Sure.
Hmm.
Very interesting. I mean, this
Hmm.
stuff is, I'm so glad we met. So, oh
Likewise.
man, it's just so cool.
Yeah.
Um, so I am so excited to play an excerpt from one of your Choctaw hymn pieces. You and I had talked about, I was like, can we play something from the opera? Will you let
Yeah.
us have a sneak peek? And you're like, we don't have anything recorded yet because we're
Mhm.
still, you're still in the middle of composing the rest of it. So, but I thought it was great that we can listen to this Choctaw hymn piece, which sounds similar to some of
Yes.
the, music you're doing in there. So tell us what we're about to hear and what it's about.
Well, this is actually a trailer that I had assembled to help push, some support for doing the opera. And in the work Loak Shopla on the new CD, there's actually a scene in there called Hymn, and it's like a fully orchestrated version of one of our Choctaw hymns that Chickasaws and Choctaws sing alike in our churches. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, those hymns are just, I love our
Oh,
hymns. They're
amazing.
so beautiful, and they're just,
Yes.
I mean, the melodies are just like they're there. They're just waiting to be, to be put with a symphonic
True.
orchestra. And so this is an example of that. And so I put the climax in there where you hear a full verse of the hymn, but with a baritone and a soprano singing with a full orchestra.
Beautiful. And what's the name of the piece?
This is called Hymn. This I
Oh,
just
just him.
Yeah,
That's right. That's
HYMN.
right.
Yeah, it's just because it's just one of our hymns, yeah, orchestrated. Mhm.
All right. Well, okay, now, folks, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. We're going to play a portion of one of Mr. Tate's pieces. And again, this isn't from the actual opera, but it'll definitely give you a taste of what is to come. So I'm going to share my screen here just a moment. With sharing this on Zoom, I have to click quite a few buttons.
I totally understand.
All right, let's do this. Can you hear it okay? Damn. Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. I love it. It just,
Thank you.
wow. No,
Well,
thank
that's
you.
you can
Thank
tell I'm a very
you.
romantic composer, and I feel
Yes.
very very romantic and dramatic about our people, and I'm very very proud of who we are. And I just feel so grateful. I think about this. It's like, we think about our ancestors that walked during the removal, from Mississippi to
Mhm.
Oklahoma. And, we've talked about this on the phone is, they walked 600 miles in mud so that I can write an opera about it. And that's a fact. They did that so that you and I have the opportunity to make a better life. And that's very deep. And so I'm just so proud
Um,
to be able to put a beautiful legend on the concert stage for the world to see. I want
hmm.
Indian country to be world players, to be in the front mind of everybody around the world. And I'm really hoping I'm contributing to that motion.
Absolutely. And not just, how to say this, not just a novelty, a, a player that can come up against anything, any other opera
Mm-hmm.
and all that. So amazing. If that, I mean, seriously, if that doesn't bring tears to your eyes or at least goosebumps, I had
Mm-hmm.
goosebumps during those moments where it's just swelling and swelling
Mm-hmm.
and then boom, the voices and
Yeah,
so
and that's the hymn straight up. That is a straight up transcription of the hymn.
unbelievable.
And yeah, I mean, these melodies are just absolutely sensational. And from what I understand, that particular one was composed during the removal. And so, I
Wow.
mean, and there were hymns that were made up on the way. I mean, that's what she did. It's like you were walking and singing. And so, I'm just hoping it draws some good spirits there.
I mean, who would have thought that they were on during the removal, they were on the Trail of Tears, they were singing these songs to help give them, I mean, when you hear the testaments of those who were actually singing on the trail, they actually were using it as a we're it was more positive than you would have thought from what
Right. Yes.
we hear from the stories
Hmm.
from their own mouths. But and who would have thought, though, now that they'd have their own opera composed by one of their own.
Yeah.
So wow.
Yeah.
Thank
I am
you for
I
sharing
am
this.
Forrest Gump. How did I end up here? I don't
How did
know.
we end up here? How did you end up here?
Yeah. Well, and of course, this takes time to see that, but this is one of the reasons, like I look back at my parents and my family and all those things that contributed to this final point here.
Yeah.
It's all real. It's all very, very real. And so I'm just, yep, I'm very grateful for everything that's happened.
Wow. And you're not even close to being done. I mean, this is just the first of 3 operas, I think.
Yes, that's right. So there, the
Mhm.
second one is a Cherokee opera, and that one is actually going to start to be workshopped by Whitesnake, the opera company in Boston, after very shortly after this one premieres. Actually, they all know each other. They delayed it because they know this one's taking some more time. So that will be sung entirely in the Cherokee language. And so I've got my Cherokee colleagues in
Cool.
Oklahoma working with that. I'm also Cherokee and Creek, and
Okay.
so I feel, so that I'm feeling very connected with this as well. But my all my advisors are all Cherokee speakers and cultural experts. So, but Barbara McAllister is the person who really pushed that. And Barbara is Cherokee, and she sang with the Met back in the day. And Barbara lived in New York for a very, very long time, had an international opera career. She's a dramatic mezzo. And now she's back in the Cherokee Nation teaching vocal lessons to Cherokee
Oh,
kids. She's
great.
a tribal employee teaching opera.
Future opera singers for Jerod Tate.
I know, right? Well, and that's how I met Kate Morton, the Cherokee soprano that I'm working with right now, because she's one of Barbara's proteges. So anyway, so Cherokee's next, and that's going to be about Sequoia and his daughter Ioka. So it's going to be about their
Oh,
relationship, and
hello.
it has 3 stories in there that are really cool. But it's them preparing their final syllabary that they're taking to the tribal council for approval for their new Cherokee press. And
Mm.
that's real. It's like, I don't know if people are aware of this, but Sequoia created the very first American Indian alphabet. And I believe what I'm hearing is that it was the first alphabet created in about 5,000 years by one person who
Wow.
never read. He only saw people reading. Like he picked it up, never read
Really
English, didn't read English. He did not
amazing.
know. He just saw it and was like, I think I want to do that for my tribe. And here this genius creates this first syllabary. I mean, and that's why one of the reasons why it looks
Disgusting.
so unusual is because he wasn't over influenced by the
Yeah,
English
right?
language. Yeah.
Ah,
So this is, but his daughter was one of his assistants in preparing everything in his shop and getting this ready. And they took it to the tribal council at the time for approval, and it was approved. And that's when they started the Cherokee Phoenix, their newspaper, and started printing and disseminating all of this reading ability of the Cherokee language
wow.
throughout their tribe. Yeah, that's amazing. So he
It's gonna be
tells her
great.
3 really awesome, important stories of the tribe, and those become the stories that are told in this opera. So it's like you got this main story, and then it breaks out into these 3 other important stories of the Cherokee
Oh,
and comes
so
back to.
cool.
Oh, I'm excited about this. It's going to be a lot
Yes,
of lot of fun
yes,
about that.
bring it.
Yeah, so that'll be opera number 2.
Okay, and do you know what number 3 is yet?
I've
Do
yes, I
something
have.
chalk talk.
I what I have some ideas. I'm still working on that. I'm still kind of settling on what the third one will be, but there will be 3.
You could
So
do something about like this guy.
that I know, right?
He was actually pardoned by President Grover Cleveland. Otherwise, he was
Oh,
going to be hanged.
oh well, thank you, President
I've
Cleveland.
got all your content ready now.
I appreciate that.
Somebody can play President Cleveland.
Right.
I'm thinking baritone. I don't know.
Yeah, I know, right?
Maybe you could do both. You could play that part too.
No, no, I won't do that. That won't happen.
No, no. If you change your
I
mind,
can,
let me know.
I
I'll
can
tell you.
sing okay, but I can't sing opera. That's just that I never trained opera, so that's not something I will do. Here, I say this, and of course, I told Rodney that I couldn't write symphonic music, and Rodney was like,
Yeah, nobody
"Wrong."
believes you anymore, Jerod. J. Rod.
I know. Thank you. Yes, my high school classmates will appreciate you calling me that. My bandmates.
I'm sure.
Yes, Chris
They
Gowdy
paid
and
me to
Dan
say
Hutter. That's a
that.
shout out to you guys, man. That's there you go.
There you go to Jared's high school classmates.
Yeah.
Thanks for slipping me the 20. Um,
It's awesome.
so I was side note curious about your singers. You said you had a Choctaw and you had these different people from different nations. And did they already speak Chickasaw or did you have to teach them? I mean, honestly, like I picked up my Italian arias when I was 12 years old, and I didn't have to know Italian to be able to pick up the diction and all that. So I assume they don't need to know Chickasaw, but did they?
No, no singer does. And I mean, there's been many choruses who have sang in the different languages that I've, been putting out there. And of course,
Yeah,
I've always got a pronunciation guide, you know. And
sure.
also one thing that's really cool is that other than the Cherokee language, a lot of our languages, when they became written, were phonetically very English based. So
True,
since we're
true.
all speaking English, English. It's actually really helpful for that. So, and I will say the Chickasaw language is extremely English looking. And so it's actually quite easy. And so when I recorded with the San Francisco Symphony and Chorus, with my album in 2007, the chorus, obviously they were singing Chickasaw, and I, went in there to help with pronunciation, and they got it very quickly. It was really quite clear. I mean, we've got the
Yeah,
nasal that's important. There's glottals, but you don't, even in our traditional music, we don't sing our glottals, the glottal
right,
stop. And
right.
then also with Choctaws and Chickasaws, we only have one vowel sound. There's no long and short versions of the vowels. And
Yeah.
also, we don't have X's or J's or Z's. So it's
Mm-hmm.
actually a much more compact alphabet.
Good
And it's
point.
really quite easy for singers to sing. And, and when every language rounds out and relaxes when it's being sung, every single language. And
Yeah.
so it's a similar circumstance. Also, one thing that's pretty cool is that in our own hymn singing, in our own traditional songs, we don't traditionally necessarily we breathe in the middle of words, like quite common to do that. So
Mm-hmm.
when I do that and I'm putting breath marks, they're like, "What's been between a word?" I'm like, "Oh, that's okay. It's no, we don't traditionally, we,
Just
we
go
do
with it.
that." And they're like,
Well,
"Oh," so I'm like, "Breathe anywhere you want to." So they're like, "Yeah."
yeah, well, every singer's dream. But
Right.
also, I mean, like if you think about French, spoken French is very different than sung French, parts of
Exactly.
it.
Mhm.
And so have those rules ever been made for Chickasaw, sung diction yet? I don't know.
No, no,
Like,
no. My pronunciation guys are the first to address all those issues, and I've got
oh
one
my gosh,
that I've
that's
had pretty
cool.
standard, and I saved everything that you're saying. I give the actual pronunciation for the speaking language, and then I say this all naturally relaxes like all languages do. So, for instance,
Yeah.
we'll have double vowels, like a double A just means that it's longer when it's spoken, but that doesn't apply to music because I'm the
Yeah.
one that's actually determining how long everything is by the rhythm. So obviously that doesn't happen. So I'm putting in the correct spellings according to our 1994 dictionary,
Mm-hmm.
but it's gonna go different directions because it's notated, and I'm the one that lengthens
Right.
or shortens whatever is happening. I mean, sometimes it's very rhythmic sounding, and sometimes it's very lyric and melodic sounding. It just really depends. But glottals we don't pronounce, even in our own, in our own folk music. So if you
Yeah. Yeah.
if you listen to a drum dance or a jump dance or a double header or something like that, I mean, we're not singing glottals,
Mm-hmm.
but in our pronunciation there are, and the nasals also aren't nearly as present, but it's
Yeah.
pretty much like a French nasal anyway. But even people who sing French have different degrees of how much they really focus on the nasals. Really
True.
depends on the singer. Hmm.
True. And I guess you do have some kind of a door opening with the hymns and things like that. Some taste of how the Chickasaw sung,
Hmm.
the language is sung,
Hmm.
but it's still very different when it comes to opera, in my opinion, or maybe it's
Agreed.
not, but
Agreed. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
very interesting. So, well, tell me about the music itself. I mean, we picked up a lot just now from getting to hear that
Mhm.
piece, but what was your overall inspiration for the general themes and sounds? Is
Mhm.
there a Native American feel to the music, I assume?
Well, I mean, that's my goal. Basically, the best way I can describe it is that I'm looking for an ethos in the sound. And within that ethos, there are specific things I'm doing. So number one is I have an enormous amount of our tribal music literally transcribed and used as base material throughout. So you're going to hear melodies all over the place. And
Hmm.
many of them will be like very, very rooted in our traditional melodies and sometimes very literally, also very abstracted. Now, in terms of like the orchestral ethos, well, the shakers are present. I will not give spoiler alerts, but that's a very,
Oh,
and throughout my orchestral music, I actually use a lot of shell shaking
oh,
sound because
cool.
that's a signature sound I really
Uh,
enjoy, and so I use it. Yeah, and sometimes that's like through little tiny egg shakers like that. I'm orchestrating the
mhm.
actual shell shaking sound. Sometimes it'll be a very small, slight sound, and sometimes it'll be a larger shaker sound. So the percussionists handle different colors of my modern abstractions of that shell
Right.
shaking sound, just like
Oh,
Indian
cool.
painters do. It's like if you look at Brent's piece, he's got a hymn singer Well, he's got a stomp, and it's called Bringing Up the Sun. And he's got this Choctaw guy bringing up the melodies through the fire and everything like that. Well, he's abstracting. He's got those ancient petroglyphs in the sky, and
Yeah.
the colors are all different. Well, that's what our native artists do. So I'm doing the same thing with our melodies and the context of the story. So I'm modernizing our ancient culture, and of course that's what our shell carvers were doing back then. They were modernizing
Yeah.
things that had been done
Right.
100 years ago. So but I use the full orchestra just like native painters used, acrylics and paintbrushes that are not aboriginal to our tribes. They're using those modern materials. I'm doing the same thing with the symphonic orchestra. So in the orchestrations, yes, I'm looking for rich woodland feel. In
Yeah.
the segment where the animals are all talking, oh my gosh, I mean, you've got a raccoon dance, you've got a quail dance, you've got a deer dance song, you've got so there all those melodies are in there, but I'm completely characterizing, I'm making them character pieces,
Right. Right.
so that it's
Oh, I
not how
love
it's
it.
sung necessarily traditionally. So I'm abstracting, but I'm making those melodies very. I'm messing with them. It's where they're creating these different characters: the Nani, the fish, or Fani, the squirrel, or Isi, the deer. And I mean all. So I'm characterizing all of this stuff, and so that's what I'm doing throughout. And I want it to come out to where you feel like you've been surrounded by woodland creatures from this specific culture. I want that
Right.
feeling.
Oh,
And
I
of course,
love that. That's
like
cool.
like when she goes and talks to the river and they have their duet about and they're in struggle. I mean, they're singing these tunes, but I mean, it's just going to be just basically big orchestrations that are very emotional. So I'm looking for that as well. So there's a big variety of treatments and drama, but I mean, again, that's what theater does. It's like you look at. I mean, look if you look if anybody is inclined to listen to Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet ballet score, oh my gosh, you want to talk about a Russian composer taking everything Russian and just doing everything possible to express all kinds of abstractions of his own Russian culture. It's a really good example. So
Right.
I feel like I'm a kid in a candy shop. I'm just like saturated in my own tribal story with all of our
Yeah.
tunes. I just feel so charged. I feel like I'm in a blanket of my own people, and
Yeah.
I'm just allowing myself just to be very inspired and very impulsive about expressing. I want all audience members to be pulled by this story,
Yes.
compelled, you know.
I don't think you're going to have any issue with that. Not at all.
Cross your fingers. Hey, it is, it has, I still have tests to pass.
Sure. But
Every
I
composer
mean,
does.
if it's anything like, what we just heard, it's going to be great. So
Yeah,
we're cheering you
it's
on.
very much, yeah, there are lots of moments like that.
Right.
There's lots of biggies. There's a lot of emotions going on.
Oh yeah. And something I think our listeners need to know is that you don't have to be an opera buff to enjoy Shell Shaker. We're all kind of learning this new thing by coming to see it in November of 2022. So with that romantic sounding score and the beautiful costuming and so on, everybody's going to get something out of this.
I hope
And
so.
and I remember when I would sing opera and I would ask somebody to come watch, they'd be like, "Oh God, no, I don't know anything about it. It's in a foreign language," and all of those things. I had to drag them to come watch, and then they always enjoyed it. I think sometimes they would run a little long for the average,
Operas
folks
can be
who,
very long. Well,
yeah,
one thing I try to encourage people to remember that I think is really cool, and that is today we are in yet another explosion of symphonic music and film.
yeah,
That it's happened many times over the last 100, ever since film has been created, but we're in yet another explosion. And right now, the public is extremely attuned and actually quite educated in every possible style of symphonic music,
hmm,
like the most classical sounding to pop sounding to very modern and edgy sounding. They mix it with metal bands. Some of it sounds very, British and very conservative, pianistic from the 1800s. I mean, there's so
yeah,
much going on. And of course, there's one Marvel movies wouldn't be what they are without these incredibly dramatic
yeah.
symphonic scores. So people are actually completely primed to listen to opera because opera is bigger than life and it's all that. It's all that big, very big expression of
I
theater.
don't even think people realize and I hope that this will make everybody think next time you watch a movie, think about the music that's in the background
Yep.
and think about how much it moves you to along the story of what you're watching. I remember when I was in college, Ren and Stimpy was really big. And I remember them playing some opera pieces in that and some classical pieces, as well as you think about Bugs Bunny. He had there was a lot of classical pieces in there too. So it's out there more than people know. I think there was a Frere Rocher commercial that had a French piece that I used to sing, and it was a duet. I can't remember what it was called, but anyway,
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Frere,
No, it's I know
yeah.
exactly which one you're
Let's
talking
sing
about
it together so we can remember.
No,
No, me neither.
no, I'm not singing that. Well,
Especially because it's supposed to be two sopranos. So
I think in bringing this up, what it does is this allows the audience to take ownership for something they already know.
yeah,
That's why it's like they're completely equipped and capable of
yeah, good
understanding.
point.
Most people know what a clarinet sounds like, or what strings instruments sound like, or what the brass instruments sound like because of their exposure to to modern cinema. It's terrific. It's
Good
really
point.
great. That intimidation factor, like otherness factor, doesn't have to exist at all. It's like, did you ever listen to the score for when Raya came out? I was listening to that, Hiloha loves Raya. It's just great. All those Disney scores that come out for all the cartoons.
Yeah,
I'm listening to the scores, and I'll tell you, I'm listening going, that's some great music. Oh my gosh. I
yeah,
really admire a lot of these film composers who make the decision they do. I mean, they're making great artistic decisions with their
true.
symphonic arrangements. It's really quite amazing.
The
It
world
really
is
is. It's
becoming more
impressive.
and more talented as we go.
It's true.
It is, isn't it? It's like, wow. I mean, even just with what you're doing. But now sometimes operas today have super titles, which is a chance for the audience to
Yes.
read the translation. So sometimes it's like a screen above or beside the stage. And so they can understand what's going on in the opera. So it's great for people who
Mhm.
don't speak Chickasaw, which is like 99% of the population.
Yeah.
Or just, they just want to understand, okay, they look upset. Why are they upset? I need to see the translation. But anyway, will Shell Shaker have super titles?
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
It's
Good.
pretty easy to
Okay.
do anymore
So
because all you do is you just lower a screen just a certain amount away and you have a PowerPoint and you project it on there and somebody just sits
great.
there and clicks the space bar at all the right times in the score. It's pretty easy to do to have super titles anymore.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nice. And so no one, y'all, you do not have an excuse to not come to this. Okay.
No excuses.
So no excuses. You're going to be moved.
It'll be a mass migration of the entire country
That's
out to
right.
Massachusetts to witness this opera.
They're all going to come. You built it. They will come.
Absolutely.
If
All
I have
these
anything to do with it, they will.
Yep, all
If
these
I can
opera stars
encourage it.
from the past will just reemerge and they'll come back to
Oh,
life and
that would be amazing. Beverly Sills would be my favorite.
right.
So, I noticed I'm going to put you on the spot. You're probably going to say no. I'm okay with rejection. I'm used to putting myself out there. So, you have a piano right there. Is there any chance you can play 30 seconds of something for us?
I'm not going to. No.
Rejected again. Fine.
I'm not prepared, and I'm like, this is a typical classical pianist thing to do. It's like, I mean, honestly, all my music is packed. I need to read something.
Oh,
I would actually play you that Choctaw hymn. I don't have it with me to
no,
read it.
it's okay. It's okay. We did not plan for that at all. I just thought I'd like throw you for a loop and make you blush. So,
Human moments. It's like, no, I'm not going to play for you.
I'm a pianist, but I'm not going to play.
I'm
Well,
not
that's the
going to
thing.
play.
Like, I never would tell people that I sang because, well, first off, most people don't want to hear opera singing, but
Mm.
for, a lot of people, if they knew you did, they're like, oh, sing something. And I'm like,
Ugh,
this
yeah.
room is so dry. It's going to be like singing
Yeah.
into cotton. No, I don't want to
Yeah,
sing
right.
for you.
I totally get it. Well, I mean, it's the same with anything. It's like, I do construction for a living. Oh, could you build a house for me?
Right, exactly. No.
Well, you're gonna have to kind of come to the site and see what's going on if you want to see the house being
Right.
built.
I know there is a price for everything. So if you want to pay me, we might be able to come up with something, but yeah.
That's funny. Well, I would rather people go on YouTube and hear like really great polished performances.
Amen. Amen. Well, thanks for not considering that. So that,
I love it.
well, something else I think is wonderful about this being created by a Native American is the fact that every detail is considered. And you shared with us earlier about the costuming for the production. And for our listeners, I'm going to share those sketches on my Native ChocTalk Facebook page, along with more information and photos about Jerod and the Shell Shaker Opera. What else can you tell us about the costumes? Anything else there?
Well, Margaret does a modern twist on ancient, costuming, and then she also matches it with the characters. So like River has this really beautiful rivery type of an outfit,
Beautiful.
but her knowledge of our ancient clothing is very deep. So she's pulling from a very, very well informed, you know, place, and it's really, really
Yeah,
cool. So, and I mean, that's what we want. So she's drawing from that tradition and making it modern. And I just
cool.
love that about her, and of course, it's really fun because all those animal characters, she's got specific costumes to that, and she's got a younger version of Loksi and the older version, and same thing with
Ah, okay.
the younger, and then 4 years later, and then so all the characters have their own look, and they're elegant. Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
are these elegant? I mean,
they're so beautiful.
look, the Met has nothing on her. I mean, I'm
Wow.
not joking.
Go
I look at
Margaret.
stuff. I look at stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, whatever. We got all that in Indian country. And in fact, with the opening of the First Americans Museum that just happened here in Oklahoma
Mm-hmm.
just a few weeks ago, Margaret and a lot of her colleagues. There's a lot of Native designers, clothing designers coming up. The Native fashion is exploding. It's awesome. I
That
love
is
it.
so
There was
great.
this
So
huge
great.
runway show with like 5 or 6 costume designers, and themselves displaying along with it. And I'm telling again, it was I hate to say this, but it was immediately after the Met, their big gala, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I'd rather this honestly, this stuff
You're
it
like,
blows
this
it
is,
away.
yeah.
This is it. This is like really great modern American stuff, and I'd much rather watch these things. It's so compelling what
Yeah.
people are doing with our designs and how they're. It's just I love fashion, but if you think about it, in world history, when people meet, the very first thing traded is fashion. Before food, before
True.
understanding language,
Oh, I
everybody's
love your
looking at look,
dress.
look what they're
Yeah.
wearing. Look at this. Everything. It's like, ooh, I like your bag. I like your shoes. That's the first thing that happens. And when people are making their own
Right.
designer masks, the first thing that happens is like, with the COVID mask. Hey, nice mask. The first thing we all notice and we start ripping from each other is fashion. So
Yeah.
I love seeing our native artists being empowered by this huge fashion movement going on right now because I
Yes.
want to see Americans, wearing American Indian fashion. I think it's great. I mean, that's what a testimony of success. So Margaret's in that whole wheelhouse, and I just love watching that and what she does and adds. It's just really, really
She
incredible.
sounds amazing. I'm gonna have to meet
Yeah,
her
and she's an
someday.
amazing person. I mean, she's just I can't get. It's like, how did I meet her? Like, how do I get to work with
Yes.
these people? I'm just
Right.
eclipsed by this talent.
Well, I remember when I used to, you do an audition for, let's just picking something, San Francisco Opera or whatever. And of course, their idea is to bring in singers from somewhere else, for instance, to be their, highlight them. And I understand why they do it. It's exciting to say, oh, they're from New York City or whatever. But I've always thought, man, there's so much good local talent in all of these different states.
Yes.
And especially Oklahoma. And I don't know that people always know that, just because Oklahoma doesn't get a ton of notoriety. It is now a little more with Reservation Dogs and
Mhm.
Killers of the Flower Moon and stuff like that. But
Right. Mhm.
um, so, we mentioned earlier that I'm Choctaw, you're Chickasaw, so we're kind of like brother and sister here. So,
Mhm. Yeah, very
what would you
much.
like people to know about your Chickasaw nation?
Well, one thing that I'm very proud of is, I mean, it's kind of similar to like the Iroquois Confederacy had a direct impact on the U.S. Constitution. When Ben Franklin came back for them, he's like, I've got our missing piece. This is going to
Mm,
seal the deal on our Constitution.
right.
Well, the Chickasaws had a very, very large impact on where the direction the country went because the Louisiana Purchase had been made, and the French were literally trying to decimate the Chickasaw people specifically because
Mm-hmm.
we were such a force. And so the French went to war with the Chickasaws, and we wiped them out. We drove them out, and I'm sorry, that created the Louisiana Purchase. It allowed the United
Right.
States to buy that part of the United States, and then of course the rest came after that. But it was 3 languages going on. One was English and French and Spanish, And that Louisiana Purchase allowed America to be what it was and to actually take over the rest of the country like that. And it's why we all speak English today instead of French to
Mm-hmm.
each other. It is the reason. And
Wow.
hedging my bets, I'm glad that, choosing the countries that would have been, I guess the colonizing country. I think we came out with the best of the three. That's my personal opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, it's like for Indian country, for the American Indians, if we had three different, totally different cultures running it, I don't think we would have been able to be as monolithic as we are today.
Hmm.
So I don't know.
That is an interesting take on it. I like that.
It's all conjecture. I mean, it's like, it's hindsight is always 2020, but I try to see a positive thing about it. But I can say very clearly that the reason why American Indians all speak English to each other is because of the Chickasaw Nation.
Interesting. I totally believe that.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful tribe too. Is it Inouye that's your chief?
Yeah. Anatoly, yes.
Yeah, he seems like a, great leader, and I'm proud of our chiefs.
Yep.
Actually, he's called a governor, I think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Not a chief.
No, I am proud of our Minkos as well. I mean, our leaders, I think, are really, really quite exceptional. And I mean, again, I'm grateful to be where we are now because, 70, 50 years ago, our leaders were government appointed. And we're back to our full elections now. So we have a lot of autonomy. Our
Yeah.
constitutions are in full force. And we've
Mm-hmm.
had those since even before removal, we had constitutions. And so it's just,
Right.
that I'm just really, really glad that we have that autonomy. And so I'm very proud of our leaders. I'm very, very proud of Bill Anatoly. I think
Same.
he's just awesome. I'm very grateful that he's our leader right now.
Absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
thank you, Chickasaw Nation, for always being a wonderful sister tribe.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So, and side note, the Chickasaw Cultural Center, is that in Ada or Ardmore?
It's in
Or
Sulphur.
Oh, it's not either one. It's in Sulphur. And I have been to it. It's just been a couple years. That is a great place for people to go and learn more about the culture, but also it's just a fun day. Bring your family. There's lots to do and see. And even just the staff there are super cool.
Yep.
So, well, I wanted to give a shout out to your team for all their hard work and expertise, your translator, your costume designer, Margaret, your singers. Obviously, I can't name them all here just because we don't have enough time, but I know that they've probably worked super hard. And I really, as a fellow singer, I really appreciate what you guys are all doing together. So you mentioned November of 2022 is the
Yeah, that's our
probably
target
when.
now. Yeah, so
Okay,
we'll be in the winter of 2022 when we premiere this,
great.
and I'm very excited. So basically, you can follow me on all the socials. I use it very much as a billboard for events.
Yeah.
I have very little personal stuff on there because then it just gets too confusing and junky. So I just put on. But it's very easy to find all the events that are happening with all this stuff, with all this classical American Indian music.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll definitely be coming to watch, probably more than once. I'm going to drag as many people as I can to come see it. Can't
Take a
wait.
bus.
That's
Bring
right.
bus load of
Everybody
Indians.
gets a t-shirt.
Yep, that's right. You're gonna have to print T-shirts now.
That's right.
Uh,
I'm going to put all this information on my Native ChocTalk Facebook page. I'll be updating y'all as we go, to see, hey, it's still November 22nd. Everybody come. Here's where you can buy tickets or whatever the case is. Do you think where will it be held? Do you know?
Oh, yes. So this was commissioned by Tien Hui Ung, who is the conductor of the Mount Holyoke Orchestra.
Oh,
And that Mount Holyoke College is part of the UMass Amherst College system. There's 5 colleges there. So it's going to be at UMass Amherst.
okay. So it's not in Oklahoma. It's
Mm-mm.
in, okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
And now for our finale, are there any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners today? Bring it on.
Okay. I've had a lot of perspective in the last year and a half, like a lot of other people have, and I'm really, really clear about choosing positivity and leading with love. I really think that that's our answers, guys, and I feel really good about saying that, and all the Zooming that we've been doing, I've been really focusing on that, and I see when we lead with love how immediately transformable it is to other folks, and people feel it. I feel it when somebody's being positive and looking at silver linings and stuff like that and embracing that with each other, because there's 8 billion people on the planet, and we all have a very unique universe to us, a very unique and beautiful story, and I just believe that people are born beautiful, brilliant, and well, and we all deserve that love for each other. So I just really like to focus on that these days, and I'm really glad to feel that way, and I just want other people to feel the same. And when I write
Yeah.
music, I like to feel legendary and universal, and like people feel like empowering no matter where you're from. I like that connection, and so I hope that people glean that from my work.
I absolutely love it. What a positive message. And as you and I talked about earlier, we have this opportunity now, our Native community does, where the spotlight is on us more than ever. And we
Mhm.
have to be responsible with that. And if we can share good, positive messages and actually influence other people in a good way, I think we should try to take ourselves up on it. Right. And thank you for,
It's a true opportunity to be leaders in a beautiful direction, and we
yeah,
have that ability to do that. We really, really do. I believe in Indians. I really believe in us as people of
absolutely.
being really great leaders. We've seen it in the past, and I think it's just a lot of futures ahead of us of great leadership.
That's right. Seize the day, y'all. Today's the day. Let's do it. So, Jerod, this has been an absolute pleasure. I picture this Chickasaw boy rising up and finding his passion and sharing that gift with the world. And not only that, but also bringing two worlds together that normally don't collide, opera and the Native American language. And what you're doing is beautiful. And we're cheering you on. So, Yako Key.
Yes, Yak okay, Chukmashki.
Right here at Chickasaw Wings, we teach people to fly. We've got 11 airplanes, 9 flight instructors, and about 5 mechanics. We turn out about 80 new certificates or ratings each year. And we train pilots who now fly at the major airlines. They fly for the Air Force, the FAA, for private jets. They even have a few missionary pilots. Our customers come from all over the United States. Here at Chickasaw, we're able to provide lower costs, a more focused training program, and we're able to provide a higher level of customer service. My favorite thing about this business is helping people, because I see people go from not knowing anything about it to being an airline pilot. Come out here and learn to fly.
Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Simply search for Native Chalk Talk. That's Native, ChocTalk. And check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.